Stay tuned because we're talking to family law attorney Mike Durgavich about representing fathers. Next on Fathers Are Parents Too. Welcome to Fathers Are Parents Too. We're here this week with family law attorney Michael Durgavich, and Mike has joined us on the show because he's going to talk to us about how his practice has evolved into representing primarily fathers, I think. Is that right, Mike?
That's correct.
Now, I think you said you started out with a general law practice, right?
Right. When I first started practicing family law about 3 years ago, I was representing both mothers and fathers, and I still do have a few mothers as clients at this point. But over the years, it's kind of gravitated towards representing mainly fathers.
And why is that?
There's a large group of people out there, and it's dads that don't have enough representation, and it seemed that playing it's the underdog position, even though you would think that men are stronger, they're better able to earn for themselves and things like that. But once you get yourself into a situation in front of a judge, you find yourself as the underdog, and I guess fighting that role was one of the things that drove me to go into law to begin with.
Now, one of the things that I encounter quite a bit throughout my practice and when I talk to people is, well, but fathers are usually the ones that run away and they abandon their responsibilities, and there's all these deadbeat dads out there, and how can you represent these guys when they're so irresponsible? And how do you counter that?
Yeah, the whole deadbeat dad thing I think is a big misnomer. There's a lot of fathers out there who want to spend time with their kids, who are paying their child support or family support, whatever a court orders them to do, and all they really want to do is have more time with their kids. So a lot of my cases come down to that I'm just trying to get more timeshare with the father and the child and the children together.
Now, why should that be a problem? I mean, if he's paying his support and he's there, that should be a no-brainer, right?
You would think it would be a no-brainer, but a lot of times you'll see that mothers will ask for supervised visits, or they'll make false allegations about either abuse or drug use or things like this, and that can delay a father being able to spend time alone with his child for years at a time, and that makes my job a lot tougher. Although that's the challenge that kind of has made defending fathers a lot better of a practice for me, I think.
So does that mean now that when you said you still represent some mothers, so do you do it differently when you're representing a mother? Do you sort of go in and say, oh, poor woman doesn't have any money and the lout ran out on her? And when you're representing a father, is it more, he's a good guy and darn it, he should see his kids? Or, are there differences in how you handle a case if you're representing one or the other?
There really are. When I'm representing a woman, I have no problem with thinking that, okay, we're going to go to a court appearance on this, and if I put it in front of the judge, there's a general bias that I see that basically the judges are more prone to give more time with the mother and also to give her whatever kind of support she needs.
So that's the no-brainer, is when you're representing mother, huh?
Right, it's a no-brainer.
You know you're going to get what you want.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when I'm representing a father, what I'll usually tell a father is that the best deal you'll ever get, and I just use the word deal as far as whatever stipulation you're going to come to as what's going to eventually be the order, the best deal you'll ever get is the deal that you make out in the hallway. Basically, don't put it in front of the judge if you can avoid it, because usually through just negotiating you can get to a better situation.
But wouldn't you think that if they could come to an agreement, you're talking about between the parents, that they wouldn't need you? I mean, it would seem to be sort of intuitive that if they have come to an attorney, it's because they're unable to reach an agreement. They can't deal with the other person. They have to go to court because that's their only option. Is that?
It's amazing, that there are other options rather than going to court, but it comes down to a lot of times that you actually need to get to the court building just so that you can have both attorneys and mother and father there all in one place. I think a better approach would be if people would have more four-way discussions at the offices and try and come up with an agreement that you can write down, because it's always easier to handle a decision if you help make the decision, basically by either agreeing to it, rather than have some judge impose a decision on you, which ultimately the judge will make a decision that will hurt each party just a little bit.
So no one will be really entirely happy with it.
Basically.
But now it seems to me then what you're saying is there's a point at which these parties can come together, the parents can come together and they can reach an agreement, and there would seem to also be an argument that by involving attorneys in it, it's going to be more expensive than if they would just find a way to do it otherwise. And you're saying sometimes it takes that, but I'm still wondering about how you justify that cost. I mean, a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, you know, attorneys, they just suck up the money, and you could do the same thing without them, and yet I know there's an answer to that.
Right.
And what is that answer?
The answer is generally that there's some reason why this relationship has come apart between the man and the woman that makes them not be able to communicate with each other. And basically, the best attorney job here is just to facilitate the two parties, the mother and the father, being able to communicate with each other. And at this point, I'm just talking about as far as visiting with the children goes, timeshare with the children, which is more or less an ongoing situation. You always have little changes. One parent can't pick up at the same time, or needs to drop off a little earlier or later, and those are the kinds of decisions that need to be made on the fly, basically, that they need to be able to discuss those things on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
But now how does having you involved, if they're going through you every time they want to make a change to a drop-off time, then that's going to be very costly. So how does that help them?
Well, I would eventually like to cut the umbilical cord, more or less, to be able to let them, to let the father and the mother be able to discuss these things. And sometimes it takes counseling. Sometimes it actually takes, you know, having the mother and father go through some sort of co-parent counseling so that they can learn how to talk to each other. Basically, men and women seem to speak a different language. And
Venus and Mars, I think, is it, right?
Yeah, I think there's a popular book of that title at this point. And so it is just getting them to learn the language of the other sex that I guess as an attorney I also help to educate fathers about going through the different processes, either through counseling or through or just taking them through mediation, telling them how to approach mediation.
Now, so you said something before the show to me about how that you feel like you've done your best job if they don't need you anymore, and I thought that was kind of odd, but it sounds like what you're saying is you see your job as being more of a facilitator than someone to go in and fight, which is what people think attorneys are for, I think.
Right. You can do it both ways, but if you go in there in a very contentious way as a father's attorney, you're going to run into the brick wall, which eventually says that if the woman is making less money, then she's going to receive her attorney's fees, and she's going to get, you know, gobs and gobs of support at that point. So basically, there is a drive to try and settle these cases, to be able to not put your guy in the situation where he has to take a judge's ruling that 99% of the time is going to make each side feel a little bit uncomfortable about the way it happened, and then you're back in court 6 months down the road, which is what I'd rather not see the guys have to do, is go back to court, or even all of my clients to go back to court. Basically, I'd like to get them to a stable point where they're getting regular timeshare with their kids, where there's a set support amount, everybody's upfront and honest about everything, and then they just go on until the kids turn 18. Because basically you're going to be dealing with the support and timeshare issues until the children turn 18 or 19, depending on, you know, if they graduate from high school on time.
And I think a lot of people don't get that. They're thinking, I want to not have to deal with this person anymore. I'm divorced from them. I want them out of my face. And they're going to have to deal with them in some fashion or another. Now, I'm curious, as you started evolving your practice to be more involved with fathers, but you're still representing mothers, have you found that your representation of mothers has changed at all?
It has. Just generally because what the court looks at is the best interests of the children. And there's a traditional bias that says that women are better parents than men. And in some cases there may be a little bit of truth to that. I've never changed a diaper, and you know, there's a lot of guys who need to make the adjustment when they're taking care of children. But what I try and do when I have a situation where I'm representing a woman, I try and open her eyes to the fact that children need both a mother and a father to be able to grow up to be a happy, healthy adult at some point. Basically, the statistics show that most of your drug using or teenage pregnancy situations happen with a child that doesn't have systematic contacts systematic and continuous contacts with both parents. And so to make a well-rounded child into a happy, healthy adult at some point, it's going to take both a male and a female influence, and from a father and a mother.
So what you're saying is it's definitely, you know, so many people think of it as an either-or situation, you know, it's either the mom or the dad, and I have to show it's going to be me, when in fact what you're saying is it takes two, which makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I'm a mom, and the first time I changed a diaper, before that I had never changed a diaper. So, you know, it's a learned process, I think, for both parents. But I think you're right. I think there's sort of this assumption that women are somehow born knowing how to do these things, and men have this learning curve, and that's just not true. It's something that both sexes of parents need to learn.
Right. It's absolutely not true that, you know, that women are biologically better at being a parent than a father is. Maybe, you know, women play with dolls, and that might give them some of these, you know, carrying a child experience. But, you know, after you learn how to do it, you know, dads are just as good as moms are. So.
Now, you mentioned something about some of the tactics that people might use, and one is to try and restrict a father's access by asking for a supervised visitation or timeshare. And what's that about, and why would someone ask for that? Have you actually encountered times when that's been asked for when it really wasn't appropriate, or you thought it wasn't appropriate? Why would they do that?
I think it's, I mean, it comes down to support. In the state of California, if a man and woman are making relatively the same amount of money, but the man, father, only has 10% timeshare, there's this, in California we have this guideline support, and it's basically a computer program that just plugs in the base salaries of both parents, percentage of timeshare, and then just spits out a guideline support amount. And if the percentage of time with the father is low, then the amount of support is higher. You know, conversely, if father has about a 35 or 40% timeshare with his kids, which is a reasonable amount of time every other extended weekend with maybe another night in between, and then half of the holidays or something like that, which, you know, maybe it's not 50-50, but it's a reasonable amount of contact so that you're not, you know, missing out on your kid growing up. Well, then, you know, it tends to level the playing field. But a lot of women aren't willing to let the father have that much time with their kids. And it may be, in a lot of situations, just a game to get more support, which is a sad thing.
So now it sounds like, I know that in the States, and I think there's quite a few of them that tie the amount of support to the amount of time each parent has the child, and I can understand to some extent the reason for doing that, and yes, I can also understand you're saying it's a disincentive to sort of let go of some of the time that you have with the child where you might otherwise. How do you work with that? Can you work with it? I mean, it's a fact that's out there. Is there any way to overcome that?
Well, it's difficult, but it does. I think we're back to communication at this point, because basically I try and educate my clients to make them understand that, you know, they have to be kind of independent in their way that they're raising their kids, and when I'm representing a woman, I'm always encouraging them to, you know, get employed if they're not employed at that point, and to try and work for the best interests of the children. And that's basically what you got to bring it back to, is the best interests of the children.
So how do your clients take it when you say, hey, you go get a job, when maybe they've been the stay-at-home parent all along, or what have you? I mean, well,
in marriages of fairly long duration, it gets to be difficult if somebody's been staying at the home for 10 years. But, you know, there is a process to basically wean yourself away from the other individual, because then we're talking about a marital dissolution, you know, whether people are getting divorced at this point. Well, the reason, you know, one of the reasons why you're getting divorced is, you know, the two of you are not going to be living together anymore. You know, you're going to be separating and living separate lives at this point, although you're going to be sharing the children with the children's time. But you need to become an independent person. I mean, you can't basically live in the past and think that, you know, keep thinking over and over in your head about, oh, well, he owes me this much money, or she, you know, she did this to me. Basically, for the parties involved, it's good to just, you know, get on with your life. And, you know, and basically a dissolution of marriage means an end to living in a certain style and going on to another, you know, another style, either a single life or onto, you know, married life with somebody else at some point. So basically it's to pick up and move past it at that point. And basically as a counselor, and this is attorney as counselor now, I'm trying to turn my clients into that they come out of it as a basically a better person on the other side.
Self-sufficient, and better self-esteem.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then we have some questions for you from the audience.
Great.
Okay, we'll be right back.
I'm a dad, a member of FREE, the Father's Rights and Equality Exchange. Most dads out there would love to spend more time with their kids, to be a real part of their lives. FREE wants to change the notion that all divorced dads are irresponsible, because most of us are dads who are responsible, and we're working for the chance to share the parenting. If you want to learn more, please call us at 1-500-4DADS. That's 1-500-4DADS. And remember, fathers are parents too.
Welcome back to Fathers Are Parents Too. We're here today with family law attorney Mike Durgavich, and we have some questions for him from the audience. Yes?
Mike, thank you. I have three little questions. First, you mentioned that you've never changed a diaper, but do you have any children?
No, I don't have any children.
Perfect excuse for that. Of the divorces that you have seen, especially with the ones with the stay-at-home mom, who normally initiates those divorces? Is it the man or the woman that files first?
You see a good degree of either mother or father declaring the divorce at that point, being the petitioner or the moving party in the case. Sometimes the mother gets bored being at home and she looks elsewhere, and then other times part of the freedom of being out and about and being the breadwinner brings up other opportunities for the father. So I would say it's about half and half. There's really no.
Half and half.
Yeah.
What is the status of prenuptial contracts? I see no promotion of them, and sometimes I wonder if it's if the divorce industry doesn't like them because maybe it will cut their income at the later end. I never see any ads for people really supporting prenuptial contracts. Are they?
You really
What's the status?
You really don't see people advertising for prenuptial agreements, although you do see enough people out there advertising to help people after the marriage is ending and other things. If you have assets to protect, though, it's easy to find a competent attorney to draft a prenuptial agreement, but a lot of times it's difficult to determine what's going to happen at the end of the marriage that's going to be a bad thing. But if you have assets that you want to protect, that you had prior to the marriage, that's certainly a great idea to get those things defined right up front.
Well, couldn't all of the things that people argue about, even in a no-asset marriage, be resolved ahead of time in a prenuptial contract?
You would think that any contract that people would come together in would be upheld exactly word for word by the courts, but I've seen agreements even for timeshare between parents that were made even post-separation or post-divorce, that if there was a slight change of circumstances for some amount of time, then the court won't even uphold that agreement that they wrote, even if it was a post-divorce agreement that they've written up. Something to the effect of they've come up with a visitation schedule. For one reason or the other party has to give up more of their timeshare over the course of 6 months or something, and that could actually cause a flip-flop in a timeshare arrangement. So even though people do come to agreements, sometimes these agreements can be broken just through the actions of the parties. There's basically a changed circumstance just because of the way the parties have been dealing with each other. So the piece of paper becomes less important if the actual what's going on is different than what's written down on the paper.
And is the court able to do that because they keep continuing jurisdiction, I guess, over that when there are children? So they do it because they can.
That's right. The courts will do it because they can. They do have
it's that great I can do it power.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question for you. Yes.
In your years that you've been involved in doing this work, have you noticed much change in the way the courts are dealing with things? Are they becoming more supportive and recognizing fathers' roles a little bit more than they have been in the past?
I think they are. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, especially with groups like Free and other groups that have cropped up to help fathers, that they're now doing more of these 50-50 arrangements, which is what most people would like to see. It would be a 50-50. But there are some counties where that's what the judges are actually supposed to try for, is basically an equitable division of the time of the children, which I think is a great thing, and it couldn't happen fast enough.
There are states, that actually have a presumption that it's not that that will be the case, that say joint custody will be ordered, but where there's a presumption that if it's not shown to be bad for the child, that's sort of assumed to be what's best for the child. So of course then everyone fights to show it's not what's best for the child, but at least it's a good thing to have as a starting point, I think. Another question, yes.
A bit of a financial question for you. I've seen cases where fathers are ordered to pay 50, 60, 70% of their net pay as child support with daycare expenses, as in 4 additional child support in the words of the court, plus all medical expenses, plus her lawyer. How often do you get paid, and how do the fathers manage that?
I get paid fairly often because I tend to do a pretty good job for my clients, and I think that's why they end up paying me. But and a lot of attorneys will ask for a huge retainer up front to cover their cost of their time, which makes some of the better attorneys a little bit less accessible. But basically you're right about there's all these costs that do get lumped onto the person who is the breadwinner. I think 70% is probably overstated, though, because there is a federal law that says that it can only be 50% of your net wages taken away, and if it's a specific order, it can be up to 65%. So.
Okay, and that's talking specifically with taking away as an order?
As in a wage assignment.
Oh, a wage assignment. Okay. So they could order more, but they just couldn't get it out of a garnishment, right?
Right. And that creates
sneaky.
That creates an arrears issue, which so many fathers find themselves, thousands and thousands of dollars in the hole and they're paying a lot of support, and they're only paying down these arrears, which add up quickly.
So the hurrier they go, the behinder they get.
Yeah, exactly.
Another question, yes.
Yeah, Mike, when you can't come to an agreement in the hallway, and normally the father isn't satisfied with every other weekend and a piece of a holiday, how aggressive do you get when you go into court then? When there's no settlement in the hallway, when you actually have to go into court, how aggressive do you get? And actually, how does that work, in terms of, is the man going to get beat up or not? That's kind of the question.
Generally, if fathers come off aggressive, they're going to be slapped down by the court because the court will want to exercise their power. For men, basically, the best thing for you to do is show that you are the reasonable person. You are the person that's most willing to try and work things out. If you show that you're the aggressive man, this is the way it has to be, and try and be really forceful, it's like, when you're pushing on a hand, the harder you push, basically the hands aren't going to move anywhere. And basically, if I go in there advocating for a father and I'm very aggressive, especially about things about timeshare or listening to the kids, what the kids are talking about, and if I come off really aggressive, the judge will interpret that aggressiveness as this person really doesn't understand how to be sensitive about the best interests of a child. So all of the dads that I represent, I advise them you are the reasonable one. You're the one that's got to show that you're willing to talk about these issues, and by acting it, you eventually become that person.
Let me just touch that a little bit more. I don't necessarily mean aggressive in demeanor, but aggressive in a legal sense. Is that a clear distinction? Or?
You file every motion. Basically, you cite the law to the judge. You bring out everything. You bring out every tool that you have at your disposal. You don't not use some tools that you have basically, but custody battles, like any other thing, can be the most expensive, long, drawn-out situations that people can actually, basically they spend their children's college funds on trying to settle custody issues. When that money could have been better applied to the best interests of the children down the road, it gets plugged into, fighting a battle. But there are times to fight. There are times that you have to take basically file the motions to be aggressive, and you can't work it out in the hall. And it didn't work in mediation. You end up in early resolutions, and it can take years and years.
And it seems like sometimes they're spending those college funds on fighting over, 1 day a month difference, one way or the other. Over just people get their teeth in things sometimes and just won't let go. We have another question. Yes.
I'm wondering what the general reason for women is to want to spend more time with their children. I have several clients who are divorced, and when I ask the women this question, it seems to be purely selfish and not coming from the best interest of the child. Have you found that to be true in your experience?
I have found that to be true, that, basically it is a selfish thing, the woman thinking that she, I can do better with this kid than he can. Maybe some of these thoughts about it would raise the amount of support she gets enters in her mind, but also just, it comes down to sometimes just plain pride, that they think that they can do it so much better and that they would be, a better parent, when the reality of the situation is that the child needs both parents.
Do you find many fathers coming from that point of view as well?
I find that a lot of fathers now are, very well educated about that they need to be a consistent part of their children's lives. Unfortunately, there's so many dads that have been beaten down by the district attorney if they're coming after them for aid for dependent children, for an out-of-work mother or something like that, that somehow support and timeshare get linked together when the two things are totally separate issues, basically. But sometimes a woman will hang this over a guy's head, well, pay me more support and you can have more time with the kids, and it just doesn't make any sense, actually.
I know that when I went through my own family law situation, that one of the things that I found going through it was, as a mother, I was actually getting this message that said, you're supposed to fight for all the time that you can, and if you don't, you're not a caring, loving mother. And so that I could see where someone coming through that system might enter it being very, reasonable in wanting what's best for the child, and somehow becoming turned around and believing that what's best for the child is taking this very hostile posture.
Almost like if a woman doesn't want to spend, all of the time, dominate their children's time, then she's being a bad mother. And that's also another thing that needs to be dispelled.
Okay, we have just time for one more comment, and what I'd like to ask you is, if you could say one thing to all the potential couples that you're going to end up working with that are out there, so this is your one chance to talk to them both at once without another attorney around, what would you say to them?
I'd say remember the children, because it all goes to the best interest of the children. And that's going to mean that both of you are going to have to be able to communicate and do the best thing to be able to have systematic contacts for both parents to the children. So you can't think about it as a me, me, me thing if there are kids involved. It's the kids first.
And that's really what it's about, and that's why we're telling everyone that fathers are parents too. And on that note, thank you for being here, and please join us next week here on Fathers Are Parents Too.